Hey guys, Scotty Wrenches here. Got a new little project going. This is a 2007 Jetta GLI, 2-liter turbo that was handed down to us. So we've got just some basic maintenance that we're getting done. So I'm going to show you how to swap out coil packs, change the plugs, and we're actually going to check high pressure fuel pump tappet that rides on the cam lobe, because this has a direct injected engine, so the fuel injectors go directly into the cylinder, so it needs a bump up in that fuel pressure. So I'm going to show you how that's done. Hang tight. Okay guys, so we can see that there's a missing engine cover. There's usually a plate that goes over the top of this engine, but because this came with an aftermarket intake already in place, that has been removed because it doesn't have the right clearance for it over here on the intake side. So again, that's been removed by the previous owner. The first task at hand, and I'll tell you what the problem was that we had, which was a misfire on cylinder 4. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 on this engine. I didn't know whether it was just bad plugs or a bad coil pack sitting up top here. So what I did earlier was literally just pried that coil pack up, disconnected from its connector in the back, swapped it with number 2, cleared the codes, took it for another drive. Literally by the end of the street, it didn't take long. It was already misfiring, so I just turned it off then, read the codes, misfire on 2. So what that told me was it wasn't really the plugs that were the problem, it was that coil pack. What I did was just went ahead and ordered a set of 4 new coil packs and new plugs, because, well, while you're here, you may as well. It's worth the extra 12 bucks. Okay, so the interesting thing that's a little different than some of the Japanese cars that we've been working on, you know I like to work on the Hondas and the Toyotas, but this is a German car and they have very different sort of connectors, as you can see down here. You are not to pry on these connectors. If you pry on them, they very likely will break, and this one actually has the tab broken off. So somebody pried on it, but this is what they normally look like. And the way that you work these is to push in on the whole connector and then pull out just a little bit on that tab, and what you should get is a little click, and they sometimes take 2 hands. But that's to secure things quite nicely, and it does a good job. Now the other thing is that it's actually almost impossible to get those off in place. So the way that you get the coil packs out is to remove the screws that hold here, which are usually in place, but on this model, someone's already broken them. So they're actually just broken off inside of the valve cover. So we didn't have to remove those screws. The only thing I had to do was come along with a very short lever flathead screwdriver, give a little pry up, and you'll hear it just go poop as it unhooks from the plug, and then you can pry up just a little bit more, and that actually kind of loosens things up for you. So then you can actually pull in here, unhook, and then just go kind of down the line with it that way. Again, to kind of show you how this connector works, here I'm going to push in with both hands on the connector. I'm going to just pry out on that one, and it should come undone just like that. So they call these D connectors if you want to really look into them and figure out how they're done. Plenty of YouTube videos, because plenty of people have problems. Okay, so I've already taken all of the D clips off. You can see that that'll just allow the fuel injector plugs to come loose there. I'm sorry, fuel injector plugs. Make that the coil pack plugs. And then we can just twist and pull up here. Your spark plug is right down in that hole. Okay, they really are only held in by the rubber gasket and the key tension there. So what you're going to do is remove the original spark plugs, using your spark plug socket that has the liner that'll just allow you to pull the spark plug out, and then replace it with your replacement plugs, whatever you're choosing. Today I actually am using Denso Platinum twin tips. They are to be gapped at 0.08 millimeters or 0.32 inches. They came gapped at 0.4, so I had to re-gap the plugs just a little tighter for that turbo engine. I put them in, they go in at 18.5 pound-feet of torque. Yes, I do use a torque wrench on these because I don't want to over torque into the aluminum head. Once they're in, again, you just literally take your new coil pack, drop it in, plug it down, make sure you get a positive sort of mechanism setting it. You can kind of see how they just set in there. Good, and then you just go through and plug things back up here. Once you get those plugged back up, make sure that they're clicked tightly, and then in goes the intake plug. Alright, so here's a quick look at the plugs that I pulled. This was from cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3, and cylinder 4. So you can see that these have some age on them and some wear for sure. So and those gaps, I'm going to measure them just for giggles, just to see what they measure, but you can see the wear on the end of that tip. That is not going to keep on firing, at least not well. So it was about time for plugs for sure. Alright, so there's the gap, 0.042. They're actually supposed to be 0.032, so that's cylinder 1. Cylinder 2 was also 0.041, but you can see here 0.047, almost 0.05 on cylinder 3. For what is that? 4.4. That was on cylinder 4. So these were all actually quite wide, which would also make for less power, potentially problems, especially at higher RPM. So again, with the new twin tips in there, gapped at 0.032, which is spec for the car, and the new coil packs, we should be running smoothly. So for those of you who wanted to just do the quick plugs and coil pack replacement, that's it. We're all buttoned back up. I just pulled these in and I made sure that I got a positive click on that D-clip. On each one of the coil packs there, we're back in place, plugged back up with my intake air sensor, and that's it for that. That's a wrap there. Now, the other thing that is a common maintenance issue on these, you can see this already has an aftermarket PCV element here, but this car again has an extra fuel pump up on top that is a high pressure fuel pump to help with the direct injection. So there is actually a mechanism here that rides on top of the cam, has an extra cam lobe on the back end here, and what that does is it moves a piston in and out that's spring loaded, and that actually bumps up the fuel pressure here. Okay, now on top of that spring there's basically a thimble shaped piece of metal that can wear out, and if it wears out it can cause catastrophic damage to the cam lobe, and then you're in for a world of problems. So we're going to take a quick look at that. I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first thing that you're going to need with this is a rag to catch some extra fuel, because we are going to have to relieve some of that fuel pressure. Right here underneath of this cap is a Schrader valve. Schrader valve is basically the same sort of valve that you have on your tire to put the air in. So what you will need to do is we're going to put that rag underneath here. We're going to drain some of that fuel out. Alright, so I got my rag in place there. All I'm going to do is just push up on that Schrader valve here with a little flathead tipped screwdriver and let the fuel that's under pressure drain out there. Now, this Schrader valve is actually going to have to be removed from this unit in order to have access to that mounting screw that is right behind it here, because you can't get anything in between. So that's going to have to be removed. It's actually held in by a 13 millimeter hex head there. So we're going to take that out in just a moment as well. Underneath there is a hard line that also needs to be released. You can see that I've already done that, but it is basically just that collar that goes onto it is a compression fitting that holds it in place. So we'll be able to also take that off. That requires, maybe that's the 13. Nope, that's 17 millimeter that you actually need to use there. Sorry, strike that. That's an 18 millimeter hex there that you need to use to get that off. And then we're going to use our Torx bit to get the rest of this off. Now, along the way, there is a return fuel line here that is flexible. I'm going to choose to keep that in place. We'll hope that I don't kink it, tear it, cause any problems. You want to try to avoid hitting this plastic tube that goes right down next to all of this, because that's actually your PCV breather that travels underneath, around, and out here into the front. If that gets cracked, then you got a PCV leak or a vacuum leak, and your engine's not going to run right because of that. Anything else? Oh yeah, this connector, also one of those nice Deke type connectors, is going to need to be released as well, so that you have some pivot. Good, so now I'm going to come in here with my 13 millimeter, just lock on there. Remember, this is upside down, so you're actually going righty-loosey on this, and we're just going to break that loose. All you need to do is get it started. Once you get it started, you should be able to take it out by your hand. Again, you will have a little bit of fuel that leaks with this, so just make sure you keep that rag in place. Once you get the Schrader out, put that up top with your cap there, and then we're going to take basically the driver with our Torx bit. Let me check the size of that for you. So these are number 30s. So what I'm going to do is just get in there, make sure I've got it seated well, break that loose, go to the next one, seat it well, break it loose, go down to the bottom one. Now this is where the Schrader valve would have been in my way. So you can see I'm right where that Schrader attaches. So that has to be removed. So boom, break that one loose. Good. Once you have them loose, you can take those out by just using your hand here. It does have a little bit of tension under it because there is a large spring there that is the return spring, so that when the tappet gets pushed out, it actually gets pushed back in. Okay, so I have all three of the Torx screws pulled out. You can see that that spring has already started to push itself out. Sometimes you need to like wiggle just a little bit to get that to unseat. Once it's unseated, you're just going to walk the whole fuel pump backwards a bit, and you might have to give it just a little bit of a turn to the side to get some of that clearance that you're going to need to get the spring out of the tappet. So that's what it looks like on the inside. You're going to want to make sure that this O-ring is in, this O-ring here needs to be in good shape. Make sure it's not torn. If it looks like it's damaged at all, replace the O-ring, because otherwise you're going to have an oil leak right here. Okay, and we're just going to go in with our finger here and just slide out, and out comes the thimble-shaped tappet. Now this one actually looks perfect. It shows pretty much no wear whatsoever. So this one must have been done sometime recently before I got the car. So, and I'm going to try to get the camera down there so that you can see the cam lobe that this rides on, if I can figure it out. There's the cam lobe inside. So you want to take a look at that as well to make sure it doesn't show any signs of wear. Anyway, so now I'm just going to put a little bit of grease, a little bit of engine builder's grease on that, make sure that it's lubed up, drop it right back in. We'll put a little touch of lubricant or oil on the O-ring just so that it slides into place without tearing. We're going to have to apply pressure to put that back into place, and then finger tighten those Torx screws into the head so that we can then seat them correctly. They only take 10 pound-feet of torque, so don't over torque them. You'll stretch them or pull the threads right out. Alright, so I have to tap it back in place here. I have a bit or a drop or two of engine assembly lube on the end of the spring here. I've already kind of gotten a little bit of oil. You can see some of the dirt right there on the top. We want to get that out of the way. You can see a little bit of oil down in the galley there. So I'm going to just worm this back in. So we give it a little twist, a little load there. And we're just going to kind of give just a little bit of a walk in. Now, again, even as I seat this nicely, which is right there, it's going to still have a little bit of a gap, and that spring, if you notice, is going to want to push it right back off. So this is where I'm going to need two hands again to tighten in, or hand tighten, the Torx screws. I got 2 out of 3 in there hand tight, and as Meatloaf says, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, because that actually does bring it closer in to the head there. And I'm just going to have to then grab my Torx bit, and we're just going to hand tighten these a little bit, just with a screwdriver effectively, and then I'll throw the torque wrench on them to get them up to 10. So just right there, and right there, and right there. Perfect. That looks like the perfect 10 based on my wrist mounted torque wrench. All right, in goes my Schrader valve. So again, you want to put these things in by hand, because you don't need to cross thread all this stuff, because then you've got a different issue at hand. So, and again, remember, it goes on the opposite way, so it's going to look like I'm loosening it to you, but that's tight. Okay, and then I can put the cover back up. So I may as well go ahead and do that right now. The last thing that I have to do is reattach the fuel line underneath. So that's going to be bringing this fitting back up and reseating that ball fitting onto the bottom of the pressure pump, and then reconnecting our D connector there. All right, let me just button her up. All right, so I've run that fitting up as far as I can with my fingers, just finger tight. It is actually pretty snug, and it's a pretty tight area to run that 17 millimeter wrench into. But again, you're just going to want to snug that in place. Remember, it is just a compression fitting, so you don't have to over torque that thing. So we've got tightness, tighten down here, tighten down here. We've got our 3 bolts tightened there. We're plugged in here, and then we're plugged. There's the click. All right, so our test will be start the car, check for any fuel leaks up top here. Okay, so first things first, before I actually turn the key to start the car, I'm just going to turn the key to let the fuel pump prime. I'm actually going to do that a couple of times just to get that system loaded up. I'll do one more time, and then we can start this time. Alright, you can see I still have my check engine light. That's because I have not reset the computer from the misfires. That sounds much better than it did before, so we have that going for us. Alright, so sounds like it's running much better. My last thing that I'll have to do is get in there with my code reader, just read through things once more. I'm sure that it's going to show my misfire on 2, which I never erased, and I just have to reset everything and take it for a test drive. So anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know if this was helpful to you. And again, as always, like or subscribe, because it just helps to get the word out, and hopefully we can help some of you guys working with your older cars, keep them on the road. Don't scrap them, keep them running. This is Scotty Wrenches signing off.